Hi, my name is Paula, and you're listening to the Let's Talk Change podcast. Hi everyone, today I talked with Taylor from Climate Crisis Eco. She's a really nice person, a climate activist, and a sustainable living advocate. We had a really interesting conversation about her climate activism, climate anxiety, self-care, all of that. So let's just jump right into it because I honestly love the conversation. Hi everyone, I'm here today with Taylor from Climate Crisis Eco.
Hey everyone, I'm so happy to be here and to be talking with you all and with Paula. I'm super excited.
I'm super excited as well. I actually wanted to film this episode since I started the podcast, so I'm super happy that we are here today.
Yay, awesome.
Maybe let's begin. When and why did you start your account?
So I started my account almost 2 years ago. I still remember the day. It was August 2nd of 2019. And I started it basically off the premise of education. I was learning more about the climate crisis and sustainability. And as I learned more, I kind of had this deeper passion for it. And I felt that I needed to do something beyond myself. Actually, what really got me into it was social media sponsored posts that were on my regular feed on Instagram. And it's kind of funny how that links there, where what I'm doing now is educating people, but how I got into it was through education. So yeah, I started my account based on, learning more and educating myself further.
So okay, I can totally relate to that. I also started as education, so I love it. And so what's your mission as Climate Crisis Eco? What would you like to achieve with your account?
Well, for me personally, I find that information within the sustainability movement isn't the most accessible. I mean, thinking about how long I've been, on social media, just within my own personal life and how long it's been since I actually encountered regarding sustainability. So I think that in and of itself, made me realize, wow, we need to work to make all this information much more accessible for communities who maybe haven't been exposed to it, right? So my mission as climatecrisis.eco is mainly just to make the information as inclusive and as accessible as I possibly can within the limits, obviously, I've set for myself with my online boundaries and things like that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. And how did you start your sustainable lifestyle? Did you learn and incorporate your sustainable lifestyle before you started that account? Did you do something for the planet before that?
Actually, no. I actually started my account. The day I started my account was the day I started learning, and the day I kind of started, I guess, quote unquote, taking action. I mainly started through small, simple swaps, changing out your toothbrush, changing your personal care products to a more low waste option. And I definitely entered through the low waste area, that movement, as opposed to sustainability in general. And once I kind of entered into that, it's hard to stop learning and to stop yourself from that education. So once I learned more, I kind of ventured into, privileges within the sustainability movement, and beyond, packaging, into ingredients, sourcing, manufacturing, those different elements that are really crucial in a sustainable system and a sustainable product. So I started basically through zero waste products, and eventually I kind of adapted sustainability to my lifestyle and different things I did on a daily basis.
I honestly love that because your account just goes so in depth into, like you said, ingredients, all of that. I never saw an account go so in depth as you do, and it's actually super interesting. So I was actually wondering, because you don't really share a lot of your daily life, not your daily life, but you don't really share a lot about yourself. So I was wondering for a while, what your typical day looks like, with school and all of that.
Well, for me, I definitely, I guess it's not really the most exciting thing. You do your basic, you wake up, you brush your teeth, all those kind of random things that everyone does during a day. But I usually, during my day, I don't have a lot of time, obviously, with other priorities in my life. So I'd say like during the afternoon is basically my free time that I take to learn, that I take to, prioritize myself, my mental health. A few things that I've kind of been doing throughout, like since starting my account, I guess, is obviously prepping posts, doing research. I love researching through different methods, like reading. I love reading books. I mean, I'm not a huge reader, but when I get into a book, I love it. So
Same.
reading, yeah, for sure. So reading, watching documentaries, also just like reading articles. That's something I started doing recently was every day I read an article at the beginning of my day. And if I don't have time, I'll do it sometime during the day, but it just helps like keep me up to date with eco news because it can be very overwhelming, like keeping up to date with your local politics, your local just systems in general. So that's something I've been doing. But basically, during the afternoon is my time where I'm invested it in, learning and bettering myself for, the community I've built on Instagram as well as just my community around me. So there really isn't too much to my day, I guess, that's like special or quote unquote what an influencer would do. I don't even know if I'd call myself an influencer, to be honest, but it's just those few little things that I've added to my routine that really don't take a lot of time, but definitely, like promote a more sustainable lifestyle and one that contributes to a better system for sure.
I love actually the idea of reading articles in the morning. That's a really good idea. I think I
Mhm.
should also start reading more because I can motivate myself to reading. I mean, when I get into a book, it's interesting, but like I can't just
Oh,
start.
I totally understand that. I know, especially with like climate books, it can be hard because a lot of them are based on science, which is
Yeah.
very important. But as a society who's been like has have as a society who has had all of that filtered out, a lot of it at least within our news systems, I mean our news that we see on TV and everything like that, all of those sources it can be hard to get into a book when you've been like kind of desensitized to that information for sure.
Yeah, and I was wondering because your topics are maybe not as popular. Like you go really in depth, so there's definitely not as much information as about like the really basic and well-known topics. I was wondering where you get your inspiration and where you find ideas and where you do your research because it's really interesting to know.
Okay. Yeah. So, for like my primary inspiration, I pretty much get it through like my daily life. I don't think there's those, I could sit here and say, oh, I get it from Pinterest, I get it from Instagram, all those different ideas like Pinterest, Instagram, podcasts, documentaries, books, all those different ideas. And yeah, I do. I get it from those things, but I think it would kind of be a lie if I just stopped it there. For me, I think it just goes into like my daily life and what I'm doing in my daily life. Like when I'm gonna walk and I see, plastic littered on the side of the road and I see a recycle sign on it, sometimes it'll like make me wonder, you know, is that actually recyclable or why is it there or, who made it? That kind of things. Like it's questioning yourself throughout your daily life. That has like extremely helped with my inspiration for my content, but also just my what I'm doing and taking action in my own life. Another example would be when you're, walking down the street or you see like a random sustainable initiative, like someone taking time to, let's say, like collect clothes and upcycle them for families who maybe don't have those, that alternative and that option. So just things like that, like you're like going about in your daily life, that's really what kind of like sparks that inspiration for myself. In addition, obviously, those things I mentioned before, like Instagram, podcast, documentaries, books, those are all huge helps as well. Specifically, like my community and, the community I've built for myself on Instagram, but also in addition, just like who I'm following and who I'm interacting with and consuming information from on my crisis.eco platform. So those things in and of itself just really spark that inspiration and that motivation to share what I'm sharing and to just do what I'm doing, essentially.
I love that. And it's kind of contrast question, I guess. So, do you experience climate anxiety? Do you think that it's a big problem nowadays?
So for me, I do definitely experience climate anxiety. I think almost everyone within the movement does because it can be really overwhelming. For example, like when I started, I was just so overwhelmed with, you know, the idea that like climate change is already here and we only have this much time. So that time factor and also just knowing like the barriers in my own life to taking action, like those things really overwhelmed me. And I think with that overwhelming feeling comes the anxiety of, will things ever change? Will I be able to be a part of that change? And am I ever like doing enough for this movement? So I think for sure, like I've definitely experienced climate anxiety, but I also just think that it's not as much as viewing it as a big problem, but it's viewing it as how we can like learn, cope, and manage with the problem because it will always be there. We're always going to have that little voice in our head, telling us things aren't going to be okay or telling us these negative topics or things about climate change, but it's about like how we manage that, how we cope that, and how we don't just, push that emotion away, but how we, deal with it and question ourselves and reflect. So I think that's like the most important thing to focus on here is, reflecting and using, the time that we have dedicated to self-care to coping and managing whatever anxiety and emotions we're having.
Yeah, totally. And what were some of the things that you have been doing lately as self-care practices?
I'd say for sure. I just started journaling actually recently. I don't know if I'd call it journaling actually. It's more of it's interesting because I'll paint and I'll journal, but then I'll add like little clips of, from magazines that I found really cool or things like that. It's almost just like this big book of random things. Like it's just something I've been doing recently to, get me feeling not only de-stressed, but also just, motivated, inspired. That's another thing I guess I could put under the inspiration category. So journaling, I also started working with CJP, which is it's Climate Journal Project, and they basically created this amazing journal for youth and people who are experiencing climate anxiety to get those coping mechanisms and ways, and they provide ways that you can manage that emotion. So I've been working with them. I've been going through their journal and just taking time to really like reflect on what I'm feeling. Because I think reflection is something that we really neglect, especially in today's society. Just like thinking about how we're feeling in today's society doesn't really, I don't think people view it as important as it really is. So I've been doing that. And like I said, like painting and just different creative ways to use my time. I also love crocheting. That's one of my favorite hobbies. I do it literally every day. And I spend a lot of time just, diving into my creative side for sure.
That's amazing. I honestly have a lot of problems just practicing self-care. I feel like I don't do it enough. And when I have time, just
Mm-hmm.
go on my phone. And I feel like a lot of people actually have that problem that
Oh,
when they
for
have
sure.
free time, they just go on their phone. Um,
Yeah, if I can
yeah,
add, I think like self-care in general, or even sustainable self-care more specifically, it's been like really commercialized within the media. It's not like a lot of the media now, it's like, oh, buy this product for self-care,
yeah,
do this, read this, but it's just self-care really isn't a one size fits all. Like it'll never be that way. So it's just learning how to what works for you and what is important to your life when it comes to self-care. So I think that's like really important also to add so that people don't feel like this is not the one and only way that you can practice self-care.
yeah, definitely. Because I feel like more and more brands have been advertising their products as relaxing, calming. So basically, all these
Mm-hmm.
things
Most
associated to self
definitely.
care, like buy this mask to pamper yourself or this hair mask. And yeah, I feel like a lot of people just don't realize that it's not really about that.
Oh, most definitely. I think that's just like a huge problem too, is media has constantly tried to drive has tried to drive consumption as our form of happiness. I think back to the documentary I watched a while ago. It's called Minimalism, and it was just a really amazing thing to watch. It's on Netflix, but it basically just unravels this sort of idea and mentality that things are our way to happiness, things are our way to de-stress and do all these different things and all these different ideas, right, that we have in our head for what self-care looks like. But in all reality, it's just figuring out what works for us. And most likely that's not going to be the small release of happiness you get when you buy something, right? You buy something especially that's not needed. So I think that's another way that I've kind of worked through that mentality and worked on my own self-care in ways that are more productive than just buying or consuming.
That's so true. And I also wanted to ask how the pandemic and lockdown influenced your work as climate crisis eco.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely influenced it in both positive and negative ways, I feel. Through COVID, I think I've been able to find more ways to connect with people, believe it or not. I've done a number of calls with different people, just talking about like our experience, even something like this, like a podcast. This is my first time doing a podcast, but it's something that I probably would never do before COVID. And I think COVID really opened me up
Right.
to that opportunity to just connect with other people, like get outside of your comfort zone. With my account, I never really used my voice, or I never really took pictures of even just myself. And now I'm starting to do a little bit more of that because I'm getting into that comfortability, and I'm allowing myself to like embrace how uncomfortable it may be, but it's really good experience, I think, in that way. On the other hand, COVID-19 is just in general, like with plastic usage, with all these things that we advocate for, it's just made it a lot harder. More people are limited financially. Myself, like I'm more limited with when it comes to that as well. So making these swaps and continuing with them if you've already made them becomes a lot harder. And there's a lot more barriers I feel like are involved, whether that be time, financial, accessibility, like where you live, etc. So COVID in general has definitely affected, how I consume, how not only how I consume things, but also how I consume information, and just going along those lines, how I consume in general.
Yeah, I love that. I honestly also grew a lot during the pandemic and the lockdown. I feel like a lot of people have experienced that. I just had kind of time
Oh,
to
most
create new
definitely.
habits and just I feel like my content really changed throughout the pandemic just because I had more time.
Yes. For sure. I started like when I started my account, which was August of 2019. I believe the pandemic started March of 2020. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that it was not too long after. So the majority of the time I've spent on my account has been during COVID. And I think during COVID, we all, like not all of us, but a lot of people in the environmental movement have adapted their message and their mission, to fitting that, like what's been happening, the barriers that have come up, and people have realized like sustainability isn't something that's accessible for everyone, right? And we have to really focus on that and not and prioritize that message just as much as ditching the plastic bag, or just as much as talking about sustainable fashion and all these different topics that we like to dive into. So I think my content has definitely changed as well, with that, and just suiting that mindset that, we're going to be imperfect and that's okay. So, yeah, it's definitely changed, how I consume information and how I distribute information among my page and my followers.
Yeah, same. And I wanted to ask, what are some of your main goals? Like, what are some of your plans for your page?
Yeah, so when it comes to my page, I don't really have a lot of plans, I guess. I'm kind of just going as I go, learning and sharing as I go along my journey. But a few things that are coming up were, I'm actually going to be doing a podcast soon, which is very exciting. And I'm
Yeah.
hoping to release that sometime during Earth Month. This is actually probably the first time I've said it on social media, other than with some close friends. But yeah, so I'm doing that. I'm also working on just making my resources more accessible. I'm trying to find ways that I can make my posts, more inclusive for communities who maybe, can't have doesn't have the resources to even view online, or doesn't have the resources to view, in the way that I'm sharing information through like infographics and things like that. So I'm just actively working on bettering my content and making it more inclusive for those communities. Other than that, there's really not a whole lot that, I'm focused on that's big, per se, but I'm constantly just like questioning what I'm putting out there and working on making sure that it's quality content that people are going to learn from, and just, throughout that, just prioritizing, my message and like my journey as well, and not trying to like detriment that by posting this many times during the week or posting this many things, etc. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have like anything else that you would like to say or anything else that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, I think another thing I was actually just thought of that I was going to add for one of my goals is to think through a lens of like inclusivity, and this not solely focused on consumers, because I think a lot, throughout this pandemic, we've really focused on that, like I said, that imperfect sustainability, the idea that not everyone has the resources, time, accessibility, availability to make these changes. So I think it's important to not only focus on the consumer aspect of it, but also the aspect of inclusivity for everyone through the supply chain, because I don't think in general it's inclusive to just focus on the consumers, but also we need to focus on, those who are making our clothes, the farmers at the bottom of the supply chain growing our food, because we've lost this really connectedness to them. So I think it's important to, question why we've lost that, but also work to, regain that consciousness and regain that lens of inclusivity for everyone, not just those at the shelf at the grocery store or those checking out at your local Walmart, etc. So that's definitely something I want to talk about.
That's so true. And I'm honestly so happy that I finally got a chance to talk to you. I can't wait for your podcast. I'm definitely going to listen when it comes out. And
Oh, yay.
yeah, I'm so just happy that you decided to make this episode with me. And yeah, thank you so much.
Of course. I'm always happy to share in different ways. So I'm definitely grateful for you to have asked me to be on here, and I look forward to, connecting with you more over on Instagram and on different platforms for sure.
Same. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
So much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to follow Global.Benefit and climatecrisis.eco on Instagram, and make sure to subscribe or like if you like more of these kind of episodes. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye!